I'm going to be talking today about content that converts. I'm from Copy Hackers. Anybody familiar with Copy Hackers? You're like, Okay, cool. A little bit. That's cool. So over at Copy, thank you. I think we're showing well. Cool.
Yep.
Got our Alec Baldwin shot, of course. So at Copy Hackers, we teach people to convert using only their words, which is kind of cool. But largely that means I teach copywriting, and I do copywriting. And we don't really talk about content. So I find like there's a distinction between copy and content, content being blog posts and things like that, and copy being more directly tied to actually getting people to say yes, which is how Aaron Orendorff, who's here as well, he put it once, and I was like, yes, that's exactly right. So getting people to say yes, that's what copy is all about. So really generating leads, generating sales, measuring the success of how your words are working based on whether you brought in money or not. Pretty nice way to measure if things are working, unless it's not working. So talking about content that converts is a little different from talking about copy that converts. We don't really talk about content converting that much. We talk about content nurturing and content educating and content building a brand, but not as much about content actually having the power to grow a business and generate revenue and actually do things that are going to keep you in a stable job for a long time. So I want to talk today about something that a lot of people don't really want to talk about, and that is, instead of educating people, what if our job was to make money? What if we did that as people who blog, and I do over at Copy Hackers, I don't just engage in copywriting. We blog about it all the time. We create a ton of content at Copy Hackers using case studies and other things like that. So I'm increasingly interested in how that work that I'm doing, blogging, can actually help me grow my business, of course also helping other people that we help out. Is it possible, though, that content can convert, that content can actually grow a business and be an important part of the business because you're generating actual money? Okay, that's a real question. So I want to show you a couple of stats. So in 2007, about 10 years ago, approximately 20% of the buying decision was made before the prospect even talked with your company. 20%, okay? So they're like warming up to the idea of working with you, but they want to talk with someone in sales, or they want to chat with somebody online, or whatever it might be. They've got questions that they need answered. 20%. So 80% didn't happen that way. 10 years later, about 70% of the buying decision is made before they ever talk with the company. What's the difference? What happened in the last 10 years? Obvious things like content marketing, right? Actually publishing your own content is bringing people to make these decisions, but we're not really measuring it that way, are we? We're still talking about educating and engaging and nurturing with our blog posts and things like that. 70% versus 20%. So people are really close to deciding and really just have like pricing questions. And do you have this one feature that I'm looking for? Thanks to all of the content that's being put out, not just by you, but by your competitors as well. So I want to kind of keep that in mind as we think about how to create content that converts and the possibility that your content could be responsible for growing the business in real, measurable ways, bringing in real leads that actually do convert. What can we do to create content that grows the business? Now, before I really dig into it, I'm going to show a lot of stuff in these slides. If you would like to see the slides and other stuff, here's a bit.ly to go to, CJ, ContentGem_Air Story for our product. So you can get more there. I'll show you that again at the end in case you don't go there. And people have paper out, which is shocking me. I go to tech conferences a lot, and I'm like, what are all these notebooks everybody's got? So you won't be going here unless you're on your phone, but you can handwrite that down and look at it later. I'm fascinated. Okay. So as we think about this, a question: can content create a billion-dollar company? Can a billion-dollar company, a unicorn, be all about content? Do we know which unicorn I'm talking about? BuzzFeed? Yes. A unicorn, billion-dollar company, republishing other people's content is how it started out, right? Republishing what other people were already putting out there. You don't have to like BuzzFeed to respect that they are doing really wicked things and their content's getting a lot better now that they've got this beyond billion-dollar valuation. So they're making money off what we all call clickbait, and we say that in like a really negative way, like the worst thing you can do is get 1 million clicks on your blog post, like, oh God. Who would do such a thing? It's so inelegant. But they're doing this not just by like coming up with crazy ideas, but by taking old school copywriting techniques and applying those to content that's already out there to get more people to click on that content. This is the headline. Does anybody know this? Does anybody recognize this? Yeah, a few people, right? Andy's like, yeah, obviously. So this is one of the most famous ads of all time. If you don't know it, that's totally cool. You don't have to be a copywriter. But it is one of the most famous ads of all time. This formula for this headline is really at the basis of most of the clickbait that we've seen early on, and there's been iterations on it since. But this headline has become famous again in copy and content because of what clickbait companies have done with it. They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play. This is, John Caples wrote this. He's a famous copywriter. It was written in 1924. It became huge, and it grew their business. This mail order learned to play a musical instrument with a booklet and no teacher. That's what this is selling. You're going to send away for a booklet that will teach you how to play the guitar. Like, not many of us would rush to sign up for that. And this performed outstandingly. The whole of everybody in 1924, even if you didn't care about it, was talking about this. Vaudeville comedians were like using it as part of their sketches. This was a really big deal, and it did kind of reshape advertising going forward and made John Caples into a really phenomenal success, and he wrote a lot more like this. So we talk about the headline formula there. We talk about like, oh, it's such a great headline formula. Clickbait, is built on it. BuzzFeed copied it and kept using it and using it and using it. But the headline is really just the beginning of what makes that ad so successful. There's this whole body here as well. This was what actually convinced and converted people. These words, 1,017 words. And Andy just said earlier the average blog post is how many words? 1,100? It's like an old school blog post. It's like we're actually writing. It's a little bit different because it's a sales letter. But there's so much happening in this really old, high converting ad that is actually happening in the blog post that we're writing, except for one big difference, which I'm going to get into. This is the text for it in case you're like, okay, but yeah, how does it read? It reads a lot like a lot of the blog posts that you might be writing right now. It's got crossheads. It's got paragraphs. It's got a story that it's trying to tell. It's got details. It's trying to like elicit some sort of emotion in the reader. It goes on, and yes, people read online and they read in print as well. There's a lot that's actually happening in there that we can take and apply and really see similarities between this high converting ad and the blog posts that we're writing. It's content that converts at 1,000 words. Okay, interesting. Content marketing isn't new, is what we can take away from that. Content marketing is not new. Writing long copy isn't new. Top of funnel lead generation, not new at all. 1,000-word lead gen pages, that's what that was. It's a 1,000-word lead gen page. If it existed today, not new. We have all those things in common with that old John Caples ad. What's the one thing our blog posts are missing that it had? An actual call to action. Yes, right? Like an actual way to generate revenue. Today, the new thing is that we're trying to be too elegant to ask for the sale. I saw a really incredible blogger. I won't mention his name. He's a friend. He's a brilliant blogger. But he said something to me, or to the whole audience when we were at a conference a year ago, that if you teach them, they will come. And then they had to shut down. Like 6 months later, this very cool company had to shut down a huge part of their marketing business and close offices. And it's that kind of mentality that we can rise above asking for the sale that is frustrating to me as a copywriter and a blogger in particular, because we can do more. They've done more before. We're just trying to rise above like there's some higher ground, which may lead to bankruptcy, however. We don't want that higher ground. If we can agree, maybe, that content marketing is part of the world of advertising, because it's doing the same thing advertising is doing, and if the only purpose of advertising, this is another old school copywriter, the only purpose is to make sales, then we are a lot closer to the world of generating revenue than we like to admit. We spend a lot of time kind of hiding from this idea that we're actually responsible in many ways for revenue. Much as you don't like it, I love it. Okay, if you don't, and you don't have to believe that, you can like suspend disbelief for a second, but let's talk about then top objectives for content marketing. Okay, and there's a little bit.ly down there again. You can look it up later, but it's just from a curata. I'm sure everybody has seen this anyway. Top objectives for content marketing, as CEOs and top-level marketers say, number 1, driving sales and leads. Then, 16% lower comes educating. Then comes brand building. The number 1 thing the business wants from you, no pressure, because we can actually do this, so it's cool. The number 1 thing is to bring in more leads, period. That's how they're measuring you. You might not be measuring yourself that way, but that's how they're actually measuring you. That's how they're going to decide where the money goes. So that's the objective. And then we've got these challenges, the top challenges as well. Engagement, yeah, number 1 challenge. Then measuring whether the content's effective, producing it, ROI, and budget. So there's some obvious kind of friction happening here. We've got these objectives around lead generation, and then these challenges that are all around like, okay, wait. So we want to generate leads, but if that's what we're supposed to be generating, it's hard to measure effectiveness because we're not actually generating leads. So is it effective or isn't it? Then comes ROI, which is exactly the same question as measuring effectiveness. Is it doing anything for our business? Again, we want it to drive leads. Is it doing anything at all for our business? It's hard to measure the ROI. I'm sure we've all had this discussion before, and that leads to the problem around finding budget. If you're supposed to drive leads, and you're not driving leads, then it's hard to identify the ROI, and it's hard for your business to give you more budget. It's very little wonder that 30% of organizations describe themselves as effective at content marketing. Jimbo. Okay, so what do? Focus on the number 1 content objective. Obviously, if you're solving a problem, what's the problem? Let's figure out how to solve it, right? The number 1 content objective is driving leads. It is. Let's make that our new job. Done. We're here to drive leads. Cool. Doesn't make it ugly. We're still doing it in cool ways. But if you did accept your role in this kind of sales position, what might change for you? Now, I've been in content. I was one of the first bloggers at Intuit, the makers of QuickBooks and TurboTax, QuickTax that used to be in Canada. So I get it. I get that it can be hard to be respected. It doesn't mean that you're not respected. I'm not saying that. There's a lot of respect, but it's not the same as if you're the one who's bringing in money. You ever go to a sales conference with sales guys? They bring in, like, U2 to perform at these events. I've never seen U2 at a content conference ever in my life. If you accepted your role in sales, you could negotiate better rates, better promotions, because you're the one who makes it rain. You could actually not be seen as a content factory anymore, where it's not like, oh, how do we get them to produce faster and more and better? All of that stuff. We need more. Wouldn't be that way anymore, right? Because you're like a highly talented salesperson. You're not the wordsmith. You're not the person who just moves words around. And then you get crazy good job security, which usually matters to us, even when the economy is good. So let's get into how to do this. But in order to actually get through considering the possibility that your content should convert, we need to not think about it as writing. We need to think about it as business. It's a bit of a mindset shift, right? When it comes to actually put down words on the page, do the actual blogging part of it, the ebook writing, the white paper. It's not at all about writing. Writing is so at the bottom of the list of what you're actually doing. It's purely about business. It's, if you want to call yourself a growth hacker, that's cool too. That is what it's all about. So we want to write content the way a copywriter would. Okay, what does that look like? Oh, I don't have a timer here, so hopefully I won't go too far over. I always over-prepare, though, but I have no timer, so someone will let me know. Okay, 2 ways to write your content like John Caples, who wrote that 1924 ad, like he would. Just 2 ways. The first one's going to be an intense one. Starts with a big idea, right? We're already doing this, but this is what a copywriter starts every long-form sales page with, every ad campaign with. What's your big idea? This big idea is the thing that connects with people, okay? So this is already something you're doing as a blogger. You're coming up, or whatever it is, however you identify as a content creator or content marketer, you're coming up with a big idea. That's important, right? Because we need people to notice and pay attention, and we're probably decently good at this already, or maybe exceptionally good at it. But all great copy does start with a big idea, and all of the highest performing content starts with a big idea. Naturally, we do want people to come over to our blog post, to pay attention, to share it. That's a very big part of what we're doing here. Because if nobody notices your content at all, did it even happen? And I say this with full love for some of the great people I've seen recently struggling with blogging, because they keep putting out these roundup posts and these 5 ways to X that feel kind of uninspired because they're lacking a big idea. You're not saying anything that's really different or worth paying attention to, and you know it in your heart when you're writing this thing, but you're like, oh, I better turn this out. And then we look at, again, the data that we saw about these bigger posts performing so much better, while quantity is still important too. Okay, so I'm going to kind of shape this whole first part around an exercise we did at my company. So Copy Hackers is the main part of our company, and we have this little product called Air Story that we've just recently launched. Back in June, the 5 core members of our team decided to challenge ourselves. Air Story is designed to help you write long-form content faster. Okay, so we're like, okay, well, if that's the case, if we're here to help bloggers blog better and faster, let's try it. In the software world, that's called dog fooding, or eating your own dog food. So we're like, okay, so for a month, we're going to do this blogging exercise where each member of the 5 core member team is going to write 1 post a week for a month. So that's 4 posts grand total for a month. Not a huge thing, right? But we had non-bloggers doing this. Like, I do a lot of writing. The other 4 members of the team do not. Like, we had 2 developers in there, we had the analytics person in there, and the lead of customer success in there. And they just don't do much blogging. So like, okay, well, let's just see if this works. So we did. We put out 19 posts. Someone missed their deadline on that first Friday. Wasn't very good. And the average read time is the important point that I want to show you. I can show you word count, et cetera, but read time is just like, you can really clearly see illustrated the differences. So we have about an average read time across this month of blogging. I think it was 6.7 or 6.5, something like that, 6.5 minutes. Something pretty average, right? 1,000, 1,200 word posts. Okay, cool. And there's this one kind of standout here. So amid all of these posts, we have this one 18-minute read. Published on a Thursday. It was mine. I published that because I'd finally got to a point where I was like, you know, I'm very busy trying to churn out all of these posts, these 1 a week, which is actually a lot for me because I take a long time to think through an idea, which is why Copy Hackers doesn't have posts that frequently. But I finally, at this point, for this 1 post, I was like, I'm going to follow my own rules for writing blog posts as well, which always, sadly, for me, means that they end up longer. But I'm going to walk you through what that was. So the post was called Everything I Wish I'd Known Before I Started Demoing SaaS. The big idea here was telling this really tragically true story of how much I suck at demoing products, how hard it was for me, my big screw-ups with it, and what I learned. So that was my bigger idea, right? I'm going to tell a personal story, and then I'm going to support it with a whole bunch of stuff that will make me better at demoing SaaS, and my reader can learn as he or she reads through what I went through. Again, here's a bit.ly for you guys, but this is, it's going to kind of scroll through so we can see. Thank God I didn't depend on Anybody looking it up online? But it's a really lengthy post. Again, an 18-minute read, not too surprising. I wrote it pretty quickly, thankfully, doing the whole dog fooding thing, from 0 to about 4,300 words in a 9-hour day. It was an intense day, but it went from 0 to that point of actually being published, which was a good thing about having a deadline, of course. So I published this big 18-minute read. It's a long one amid all the other ones on a blog that, by the way, was brand new. Nobody had ever been to this. We'd had these, of course, earlier in the month. We'd been publishing every single day, but we weren't driving emails to it because we were just experimenting with actually using AirStory to write blog posts. That was it. It wasn't there to let's promote it, let's grow, let's do anything. We were just trying to see if AirStory worked for this purpose. So we had this blog that was basically a ghost town, not promoted in any way. We did a Facebook post every day, just one small, hey, we posted something new. That was it. It wasn't trying hard at all because that wasn't the point. But after publishing this, we went from having nothing, nobody coming, just absolute, just dead. We shouldn't have done it at all. It's a very upsetting sort of thing to see every time that you log in. And then suddenly, there's this big spike. Out of nowhere, out of the wasteland, people started showing up, and they all came in a big horde. This was a couple days after I actually posted, but they were all coming to that one giant post, and they were coming from Y Combinator. Anybody familiar with Hacker News? Yeah, a few people. Cool. So Hacker News is a big developer community that for people who are technical SaaS founders. So the technical founder of a SaaS company, a lot of developers who are doing their own demos themselves. So a big idea that resonated with that particular group, and it got shared on Hacker News, got voted to the top of Hacker News. We didn't do this. Someone else did it. They found it. They liked it. And it got voted up to the top by the community. So we had all these people coming in to look at this one post. Pretty cool. And we compare it over time. You can see. Some of you cannot see. So this is it here. Everything I wish I'd known before I started demoing SaaS is 56,000 views. And again, it was posted on Medium. That's where this is coming from. The next highest view is 352 views. And then after that is 270 versus 56,000 views. So you write this epic post, this really big post, and even if nobody's looking, nobody's coming, you're not promoting it in any way, if it gets discovered and shared, it can do really cool things. I'm sure other people saw these other posts that were shared as well, these 6-minute reads, right? They saw them on Facebook too. They didn't post it to Hacker News, and if they did, nobody on Hacker News cared. Nobody voted it up. Nobody clicked through to see what was going on. It wasn't until we shared something really exceptional, really big, with a really big idea, that people started to come, that people actually cared. Not too shocking, right? This is what the copywriting world has taught me forever. Now, it's not long content for the sake of long content. And that's the same thing with in the copywriting world. People say, oh, long copy performs well, a long-form sales page performs well. Not necessarily at all. It's not long for the sake of just being long. That's not the point. Here's an interesting point that kind of helps clarify what's going on here that's cool, is it laid out a formula for success. Right? It laid out a way that people could actually say, okay, here's someone who screwed up. Here's my personal story of how I screwed up at demoing SaaS, and here's what I'm going to do to change my life so that I don't screw up that way anymore. That's it. So it's not long just to be long. We're telling a full, rich story. Okay, now once you've got that big idea, then comes the really unsexy part of writing these blog posts, which is the process side of it. Everybody loves talking about process, right? Not as much. Not as much. Okay, I understand. That's fine. So what is your process? What's your writing process? When you're going to write a blog post, you don't have to shout it out. People are like, step 1. No, don't worry about shouting it out. But a lot of us don't have a process. And I was an English major. I was a creative agency writer for a long time. I have been in the world of waiting for the muse to strike. Rarely strikes when you want it to, if it ever comes at all. But there's this kind of mythologized sort of idea of writing. Like I know when I got my first job as a writer, I just said it, as a copywriter, I called myself a writer, and I was like, I'm getting paid to write. This is awesome. But it wasn't what I was being paid for. The business did not hire me for that, but I still approached it like, oh, my process is I'm going to go sit in a coffee shop, and I'm going to like open my laptop and think. And that's ridiculous, right? But that's the process. You go to this like quiet place to write, right? Because in order to think, you need to be alone with your thoughts, right? You have to do that. But while you're writing, somehow, genius just doesn't strike at all, right? It turns out your editorializing basically sucks. What happens? You get kind of fed up and you find something else to do. That's the writing process that a lot of us follow. It's not the most productive way to get stuff done. You need a process. I'm happy to let you borrow from copywriters. So the process that we follow for writing copy that converts is the same process that we follow for writing these big idea or epic posts that we write at Copy Hackers, and then I posted that one time on thebetterstory.co. That process is really simple. You might already actually follow it. Research first, then develop a framework, then you actually start writing, and then you engage in CRO, or conversion rate optimization. That's the part where you actually go in and optimize it for conversions. Okay, so that's the basic 4-step process, but it really looks a lot more like this. So research is ridiculous. Research is really what your job is entirely when you're trying to create this kind of content. You are researching endlessly. The slide previously said crap ton of research. I decided to remove crap ton because it's not a very nice looking word on the slide, but it is a crap ton of research, like an endless amount of it. Once you think you've done enough, you still have not done enough. Keep researching. I'm going to show you what that really looks like for us. More research than you could ever imagine. So I'm going to walk you through how I wrote that SaaS, that how to demo SaaS, or everything I wish I'd known about demoing SaaS before I started demoing it. This is exactly what I did. Very actionable in case you're like, well, I want to do exactly the same thing too. I've shown this to my mastermind as well, and they responded well to it, so I'm going to share it with you. Start with research, okay? So you go and you enter whatever that thing is that you're trying to write. You can do this in BuzzSumo too. I didn't do it in BuzzSumo for how to demo SaaS because there wasn't a lot in BuzzSumo for how to demo SaaS, so I just didn't. I went straight to Google, go through and right-click. Just open everything you find in a new tab. New tab, new tab, new tab. Just keep going through and doing that. Doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's great, doesn't matter anything yet. You're not going to worry about it. You're just going to get as much research open on the screen as you can. That's it. Then you go in to each tab and you do the thing that we do, which is we read. So you go through and you start reading it and learning, and anything that's interesting to you might be interesting to somebody else. So you go through and you start clipping, okay? And this is me clipping here with our own researcher. If you use Evernote's Clipper, great. That's also a great thing too. Whatever it is that you're using when you research, okay, cool, fine. Go through and start researching as much as you can, clipping that interesting stuff again and again, sending it to wherever you need to send it, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Once you've gone through and you've done all of that research, clipping as much as you can, then you go and you actually try to do something with it, right? So you'll find that you have, oh, sorry, I'll go back. I don't know what it's doing right here. Okay, cool. So for us, this is the actual project that I created here for how to demo SaaS. It has 100 different notes in it. These are all just notes. These are clips that we made, that I created when I was going through and doing the research. So you have all of this stuff that you can now use, okay? So this is your full research. It's all going to be in one space. Ideally, again, if you use Evernote, cool. Just make sure you organize it in a clean, easy-to-use way. If you use Google Docs and Google Keep, I think you can do something somewhat similar. I don't know if they have a clipper, though. This takes about 4 hours. For this post in particular, it took about 4 hours to do the research. So block out your morning. Get coffee. It's fine. You can go to a coffee shop and do this part of it, too. Expect to read about 20 posts. Expect to go through a bunch of forum responses. Those can be great, like Quora can be a really good resource when you're doing research. You get a great variety of ideas when you do research on Quora. And expect to create about 100 different notes or clips when you're doing this research, okay? That's the big part of it. Then comes the framework. Does anybody use a framework or a template when you're starting to write a blog post? A few people, right? It's good. It's a good shortcut. We always try to shortcut parts of our writing process, but that's like the great shortcut to find. Find a framework that works for you and just keep using it, at least as a starting point. So you want to write out on your document frameworks like problem, agitation, solution, which is a copywriter framework. All of these ones showing right now are attention, interest, desire, action. The 4 Ps as well. Go through and just type that out on there. That's fine. It's a starting point. The blank page is a terrifying thing. Put something down on it. If you don't want to use those copywriter frameworks, go find a template as well. That's perfectly fine. Or you can use, like if you've ever studied sales letters, because you're really writing a sales letter when you're writing a blog post that converts, go and use what the sales, like some classic genres or hooks or whatever you want to call them for writing a sales letter. Start with the open letter, right? Start thinking about how can I do this post as an open letter to blank who blank. So an open letter to SaaS founders who suck at demoing their product. Okay, fine. The personal letter, the reluctant hero, the special report, the world is wrong, align with us. All of these kinds of old school copywriting, again, we call them genres, that you can use to start figuring out how you're going to tell this story. You've got all this research. How are you going to get that on the page in a way that people are actually going to read it and care to the point that they move forward with becoming a lead? And that's why you want to have a framework, because you're not just educating. You're not just saying, here's how you do this, guys, but you want to draw people in and move them through your post so they actually convert at the end. This is the smallest part of your process. It takes like 27 seconds, so you don't have to block out a lot of time. Just be prepared to actually use a framework, possibly for the first time in your life. Give it a shot. There are lots of them out there. And then that brings us to composition. This is the part where we tend to jump to most of the time when we're actually writing something. Don't jump to it. This part comes third at best. So go through and take that initial framework that you have and start fleshing it out with what you're actually going to be sharing. So this is my exact outline, the top of it at least, for how to demo SaaS, that post. There's this one part here, pre-demo. So what I did, and what you should do, is once you've done all that research, you want to tag the research that you've done so that it will fit under these headlines. So start with your outline, and then go through and say, okay, so this is my pre-demo. This is the part that's going to be all about pre-demo. I'm going to go through my cards or notes, whatever I've created, and tag appropriately. So I'll tag for each of the right words in there that will make sense for you when you're actually going through and bringing stuff in. So that meant actually tagging cards with like pre-demo. Once you've done that, then if you're using a decent technology, you can then just drag and drop it together, which you can do in Google Docs already if you're using Google, again, Keep and Google Docs. You can go through and do that there. Or if you're using AirStory, you can do it in AirStory as well. How long should this take? This part is the part that takes forever if you are hacking stuff together. For me, it took 90 minutes to organize everything in the outline and then go through and merge cards and start stitching it together. 90 minutes, that's a little block of time in the afternoon. Okay, once you've done that, once you've got this good draft, we don't want to just go through and edit at this point. We want to optimize like somebody in conversion rate optimization. So what does that look like? This is actually the part where your inner copywriter, if you have one, gets to shine. Okay? So normally when I'm standing up on a stage, I'm talking largely about case studies, and not my own things ever, things that I've done for other clients. So I want to, as I get into now the copywriting part of writing this content, I would normally pause and go through a bunch of case studies in detail so that you could really clearly see what's going on. But I'm not going to do that this time because that's not the point. This isn't a copywriting exercise, even though it's including copywriting stuff. What I am going to do is show you a couple of case studies very, very quickly, and then break down for you some copywriting techniques that you can apply to your own content writing. And you'll know that they work or that they're worth testing because of this case study, these two case studies I'm going to show you that they're based on. So, okay, You won't be able to see any details on this. That's fine. It's not the point. I'm going to show you some close-ups afterward. But is anybody familiar with Wistia? Wistia? Few people? Who loves Wistia? Everybody's shy about loving it. Justin's the only one with his hand way up. Like, you love it. I can tell. Right? It's cool. And they're a cool company, and they make cool content. Okay, so we were working with Wistia, who we love and we've been using forever. Wistia has onboarding emails. Some people here might be also involved in writing copy like that, like onboarding emails. So we tested with Wistia, A/B tested, 8 emails against their 8 emails. These are onboarding emails. They're meant to move people to say yes to actually paying for the product, not just continuing a trial, but paying for the product. So A is the control over here on the left. B is the variation that we wrote for them. We tested these emails, ours against theirs, and ours brought in 3.5 times the paid conversions. That's a really good lift when all you're doing is changing the words on the page. This is copywriting techniques that get people to say yes. So that's one example. I'm going to get into the actual techniques, but this is just to help you say, okay, she might not be full of crap here. Okay, they kind of know what they're doing, what copywriters should be doing. Here's another one. I'm going to reference this. We worked with a solution called Sweat Block. Sweat Block is for people who suffer from hyperhidrosis, or basically you sweat a lot. And you sweat on your hands, you sweat on the back of your neck, you sweat on your knees, you sweat on the bottom of your feet. You sweat everywhere or in certain places, and it's really, it's debilitating for you in your life, okay? So it's a great solution. We did a bunch of different testing with them. This is the control over on the left, variation A. That was a winning variation that we had created already for them. We tested against that a new variation that was more copywriterly is the best way I would put it. So it was trying harder to apply the techniques of conversion copywriting in order to get more people to buy. And it increased paid conversions by about 50%. So understanding that we test this stuff, that this is stuff that has worked a lot over time, I'm going to now introduce you to some of those techniques that we use to get these great results when we're actually writing copy, and how those can then be used in the content that you're creating. So these are just a handful of conversion copywriting techniques. I pulled a ton out actually at the last minute last night because I didn't want to tire everybody with all of my copywriting geeking, but there will be 5 of them here. So the first one is write your blog post like it's a long-form sales page, which means you have to learn how to write a long-form sales page. But once you know that, life gets so much better in so many ways. So this old school ad is a long-form sales page. It's a sales letter. That's totally fine. So how do you actually go about writing a long-form sales page? A long-form sales page is designed to move your prospect from one stage of awareness all the way to the final stage of awareness. What are stages of awareness? Anybody familiar with these? No? Okay. Well, this is fun then. Okay, so there are 5 core stages of awareness. Our job when we're trying to get people to buy is to take them from whatever their starting stage of awareness is and move them down here to most aware or most aware with high intent. Content does exactly that. That is why, or it can do almost all of that, which is why we saw that 70% number earlier, because people are filling in the top of this awareness, I wanted to say schedule, but kind of scheme. They're all at the top. It's already being decided for them, right? Your content is already doing a lot of what's going on up here. So pain aware, we want to move people from unaware through to pain aware, like I'm aware of my pain now. Oh, sorry, I forgot that was on. I'm aware of my pain now, through to I've felt this pain. I'm looking for solutions to my pain. From solution through to product, like, okay, I know that solutions exist for my pain. What are some of the products that I should be considering? Through to most aware, where they're aware of the product that you sell, how it solves their pain, and now they're just kind of sitting on the fence and waiting to buy for reasons, which is why we bring them down to most aware with high intent. Okay, so we're moving people through these stages of awareness. It's actually kind of fun. Don't worry, but most of our blog posts live in this space where we're moving people from pain aware to solution aware, and then we stop. We stop. We introduce this pain that they're feeling. We educate them on solutions for it. And then we stop. But there's all these other parts down here that we could just keep. What if we just kept going? What if we just kept writing on the page and moved from solution through to product awareness? What if we did that like they do on sales pages? What if we kept going and we did most aware? We just kept moving people. We didn't stop at solution at all. That's what long-form sales pages are all about. Most sales pages go from pain aware, move you on the page to solution aware, then introduce the product, then tell you all the reasons it's right for you, and then give you some sort of incentive like an urgency play or scarcity or something like that, a reason to move forward. That's what sales pages do. We can do exactly the same thing with our content. We just have to keep going. So this is copywriting. This is, again, that sweat block example that I gave you. This is the full page. I only showed you the top of it before. This is the full page. Pain aware, up at the top, we join them in their moment of pain. Like the line was, it doesn't even have to be hot out, my armpits are always wet. That was the headline. That's pain, right? We're matching where they're at. We're not talking about the solution or the product yet. It's not about, oh, hey, here's sweat block, it'll help you with your problem. First, let's talk about the problem. We do that in copywriting. Then we move into solution awareness, right? Okay, there are solutions for you. You might have tried some of those solutions, but regular deodorant isn't working. You don't want to try Botox. Then we get into the product. We talk a lot about the product, really nurturing them through the whole product part of it. Then down to most aware, where we have the actual call to action. And then most aware with high intent, where we do extra things to really move them to buy at that point. That's the basic flow that we're working with when we're writing a long-form sales page. Why can't we do something really similar with our content? Why can't we join them in the pain that they're feeling, walk them through the solution to it, and then say, hey, and this is what our product does, by the way. Like, you don't have to go forward with this anymore. And what if we did that on every single blog post that we wrote? What if you tried? What if the business grew? What if your boss was super happy? Like, that could be incredible. So your new blog post doesn't have to go all the way to most aware or most aware with high intent. If you're a super baller and you want to try it, cool. But you can just go through to the point where you now connect the dots between your solution and your product, like the solution that you're recommending in your blog post and your product, period, right? That's number one. Number two is building to the call to action. So again, I mentioned that very few of our blog posts actually have calls to action. We want to do that. Here is the Wistia email. This is the 7th or the 6th of 8 emails. This is where we had moved people through product awareness, and we now knew that they were most aware. We were trying to get them to buy because they're in a really good state, because they understand their pain, they know solutions exist, they know that Wistia is the right solution for them. It's just time to get them to actually buy. So we put in a call to action. Of course we did. Call to action at the bottom after really working hard to get them to convert. It's right there. Of course it's right there on an email that's trying to get people to buy. But why isn't it on our blog post then? It was on our blog post for how to demo SaaS. It was at the bottom of it. I said, hey, by the way, this whole post was written using the AirStory researcher in 4 hours. We had 7,000 words. It got to about 9 hours spent doing the whole thing. Try AirStory now for your writing project. And that brought in leads. That continues to bring in leads for us. And that's one post. But we had to have the call to action in there. If you don't have the call to action, how are people going to move on things? They might, but why would you make them go looking for stuff when you could just tie it all together at the bottom and start generating those leads? Number 3 is really copywriterly, and that is tapping into ugly things that are true for your reader. It's true for all of us. We don't like to admit it. That's why copywriters tap into it, because it's like this buried down deep thing that we're all kind of hiding from. So they laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, it's not negative, but what's it actually about as a headline? What do you feel? There's like this kind of attack on his pride, right? Like, so they laughed at me when I sat down at the piano, but then those fuckers, when I started to play, seriously, right? So you have that pride that we're talking about. You've got ego introduced, right? And this is where this is why they hide conversion copywriters and direct response copywriters at the back of the agency, because we're like engaged in what people think is shady, but it's not. We're tapping into those things that people already do feel, right? These 7 deadly sins. What if you just reworked your headline with lust in mind? It doesn't have to be negative. You don't have to say like boobs, but you can like do something with lust involved somehow, right? Ideally, you'll just want to add ego, tap into your prospect's ego, just make them really think it's all about them. What are those negative feelings that someone might feel about them or that they actually do feel and they're hiding from? So tapping into the ugly in your content can happen in an okay way, right? Like it's not super negative, but this is a post on Copy Hackers that Sophia wrote, or your free trial emails making you look desperate. Here's how to fix that, right? Just a little thing, right? Not everybody's going to feel cool about feeling desperate, but some people will. Some people will be like, do they make me look desperate? And that's what we want to tap into. That's it. And you can still do that and be on brand, by the way. Wistia has a very strong brand. We applied these same techniques to Wistia, and it was not off-brand at all. So you can absolutely stay on brand and keep everybody happy in the branding department. Use the first-person perspective. I mentioned this already, but this is, again, a copywriter thing. It doesn't even have to be hot out. My armpits are always wet. A headline in the first person. You can do the same with your blog posts. Those are some of our highest performing blog posts on the Copy Hackers blog, are the ones where the headline is in the first person. So for us, if we were to compare the two that we have here, everything I wish I'd known before I started demoing SaaS versus everything you need to know before you start demoing SaaS. We didn't test it because we didn't. We went with the one that we know is going to work better because first-person perspective works better again and again and again. Because there's curiosity there, right? Everything you need to know before you start demoing SaaS, feels like I'm going to have to work. There's a lot to learn. I might bookmark it and go back later. Everything I wish I'd known before I started demoing SaaS, there's a story there, right? Like I'm going to watch somebody fall down hard. That's like kind of good to watch. It's good TV. So use the first-person perspective. And then formula, like science, formula the crap out of your headline, right? So if all else fails, and it almost always does, go ahead and use a formula. Don't rely on yourself, on your own brain, on that like creative process, or waiting for the muse to strike with the perfect formula or the perfect headline. Don't. Put in whatever placeholder headline you need to in order to get through actually doing that first draft of what you're writing. But then go back and use a formula to rewrite your headline. I think it was BuzzFeed that said they go through 50 headlines every time they write anything. Has anybody heard that? Yeah, like just so many headlines. Keep going and going and going, and you might actually get to the point where you're at a good place once you're at like number 50. So, but where do those headlines come from? You could write 50 really crappy headlines in a row. If you use formulas, you might write 10 really good ones in there, and then you just get to choose from awesome ones. So these are some headline formulas. We have a ton on the Copy Hackers blog on this really huge post that we have about formulas in general. But these are from Brian Dean at Backlinko. There's one that I pulled out that I didn't include here, but they're really useful. We went through and optimized all of our headlines on the Copy Hackers blog with this list, with just these plus the one that I pulled out, and I don't even remember why I pulled it out. You can just go through, open up WordPress, go in, and just like start changing your headlines, just like that. Of course, watching SEO and all that crap. But you can do all of these things and actually make it more compelling. And when people land on your blog post in the SERPs and they see something that's like built to get people to move forward, like copywriting is all about, cool. They're probably more likely to click through than to be bored to death by your how to demo SaaS headline that was the default that you were starting with. So this is what that looks like for us. This is just a snapshot of some of our Copy Hackers posts. So use these 7 hacks on your thank you pages to boost retention. Number 3 is beyond easy. Just going back in and just rewriting the headlines that you've got. So we want to write like a long-form sales page. We want to tap into the ugly. We want to use the first person, formula the crap out of your headline, and build to that call to action. That's the core of what I want to share with you today, and I recognize that I hauled-ass through a lot of it. But there's one other point that I want to share with you before hopefully we can take some questions. I think there's time for that. The core of what I want to share with you was that, but there's this one, if you're really interested in writing content that converts, There's a quote from one of my favorite copywriters, Gene Schwartz, that I like to share with those people who really want to try it. I'm going to share it with you. It turns off some people big time, and that's like fine. But if you want to try something cool, this changed the way that I write this quote. Gene Schwartz said, "It's not about building better mousetraps. It's about building larger mice and then building a terrifying fear of them in your customers." It's fun to try that, right? Like, it's way more interesting than just talking about your better mousetrap. And that's exactly what content can do. Content can make the mouse big. That's what it's doing, right? You can make people feel this problem that they have with every new post that you write, bringing it more and more to life for people. That's what it can do. It can create that terrifying fear of mice, where they're so busy thinking, oh my gosh, I have to solve this, and they believe because your content is so good that naturally you are the ones to solve it for them. Great, you can put copywriters out of business because your content is doing all of this great work. It can create that terrifying fear of mice. That means if it can do those things, it can sell the mousetrap, or it can at least sell getting leads for a demo of your mousetrap. That is all that I really have to share with you today. I hope it's helpful for you. Thanks. I'll just leave that.
Are there any questions for Joanna? How about another hand for Joanna Wiebe, ladies and gentlemen? That was awesome.
Thanks.
We do have time for a couple questions. Anybody have anything that I can pretend to answer? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the question was, if you work for a service business, the people who come to, the prospects who come in are aware of your competitors too and are cross-shopping, basically. You're still creating content for them. They're at that stage of awareness where they're at least product aware, right? Because they know who you are. So now you're moving them from product to most aware with high intent. Okay, cool. So, and this is, have you read the book They Ask, You Answer? Has anybody read that book? Right? Right? Okay, so I would read that book if I were you. He talks about exactly that, like about how he grew his pool company, which was just he doesn't make it sound very great. It's a fiberglass pool company. Like, I guess that's the bad kind of pool or something. But how when somebody comes to you with pricing questions, you're the first one you post your pricing answers online, right? You take all of those questions that they're asking you. So yeah, they're coming to you, comparing you against competitors. But if you're the one who posts your prices online, who talks through why that's a big deal. Like, I would read that book, honestly, because I think it would apply really well to your situation. And it's really just creating content at that product stage of awareness. So, and we tend to put that in FAQs, like we bury it in FAQs and support material, which can rank still, so that's fine. But you could just as easily turn it into content, where then, because they're product most aware, there's a really clear opportunity for a call to action there, because it can be a much shorter post that's all about, here's how we compare to the competition, here's how we're better, here's how they're better. If that matters to you, okay, go with them. If it doesn't matter to you, here's how you can get in contact with us and we'll reach out to you right away, right? Like just doing the things that you would do on a lead gen page, but you're doing it in a blog post instead. Does that help? Hopefully. Read the book. Everybody is so good. Anything else? Are we good?
Joanna gets 5% from each copy of the book sold. So I want to make
wish that'd be awesome.
I kid. Any other questions for Joanna? We have time for like one or two more. Anybody? Yes, right back there. Speak loud and proud.
I can do it. So I did go to your Bitly link already on my mobile phone.
Okay, did it work?
I downloaded the PDF slides.
Yeah.
I'm curious why you don't have a lead form in front of the slides. What is the balance between including a call to action and requiring some sort of information in exchange?
Yeah, I didn't. I made a conscious decision in spite of my topic not to, because I didn't. You're already here. You already paid for something. And honestly, like, this is the thing. I did, however, put a link in the very top to Air Story, which is the most important thing to me, right? So I'd rather you click through, look at Air Story, and we'll see what happens there, than collect your email address That said, I can just go into lead pages right away and add a new, no, I'm kidding. But no, I just didn't want to because you're here, you're watching it, and I would feel annoyed if I were in the audience when I'm watching the slides and Joanna's like, hey, here, go see my slides. And you're like, screw you, I can't even get to your slides. So that's why I just put it there. So I hope that's, look, it was a conscious decision.
Anything else? Cool. How about, again, another round of applause for Joanna Wiebe, who is awesome. Thank you, Joanna.
I will leave that there. Thank you.